In the quiet town of Oak Ridge, England, lived a 35-year-old woman named Elena Voss. She worked part-time at a small record store called Vinyl Haven, where the smell of old plastic sleeves and faded posters filled the air. Elena had once dreamed of great things: swimming competitively, playing in a band, traveling the world. But life had a way of shrinking those dreams into quiet disappointments. On what would become the worst day of her life, everything unraveled. Her elderly neighbor, Mr. Patel, whom she sometimes helped with groceries, no longer needed her assistance. His daughter had moved in. Her only piano student, a quiet boy named Theo, told her his parents were canceling the lessons because he wanted to focus on football instead. At the record store, her boss let her go. Business was slow, and they needed to cut costs. Later that evening, her cat, a scruffy tabby named Whiskers, was found dead by the roadside after slipping out unnoticed. Elena sat alone in her small, cluttered flat, staring at the empty food bowl. She had let everyone down, she thought. Her father had wanted her to pursue swimming seriously. She had quit at 16 after one argument too many. Her brother, Marcus, had begged her to stay in their indie band, The Echoes, just as they were gaining traction. She had walked away, fearing the instability. Her best friend from university, Lila, had moved to New Zealand years ago and pleaded with Elena to join her for a fresh start. Elena had stayed behind, too scared to uproot everything. Regret piled on regret like heavy snow. She felt invisible, unnecessary. That night, as rain pattered against the window, Elena wrote a short note. "I'm sorry for everything. I tried. Please forgive me." She posted a final, vague message on social media, took a handful of sleeping pills with a glass of cheap wine, and lay down on her unmade bed. The world faded to black. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in her flat. She stood in a vast, endless library. The shelves stretched infinitely in every direction, filled with books of every size and color, their spines glowing faintly under soft, warm lights. The air smelled of old paper and possibility. A large oak clock on the wall showed exactly midnight, and it wasn't moving. Behind a polished wooden desk sat a familiar face. Mrs. Hargrove, her old school librarian from Hazeldean Secondary, looking exactly as she had 20 years ago. Kind eyes, silver hair in a neat bun, a cardigan draped over her shoulders. "Elena," Mrs. Hargrove said gently, as if they had seen each other yesterday. "Welcome to the Midnight Library." Elena blinked, confused. This isn't real. I took the pills. I should be dead." Mrs. Hargrove finished calmly. "Not quite. You're between life and death. A kind of limbo. The Midnight Library exists for people like you, those drowning in regret. Here, time stands still. You can explore the lives you could have lived if you had made different choices." Elena laughed bitterly. "Sounds like a dream, or a hallucination." "It's neither," Mrs. Hargrove replied. "Every book on these shelves represents a different version of your life. One where you said yes instead of no. One where you didn't quit swimming. One where you stayed with your ex, Ryan. Pick a book and you'll slip into that life. You'll feel it as if it's your own. If you find a version you truly want to stay in, you will. The library will fade, and that life becomes permanent. But if you die in one of those lives, or if you decide it's not right, you return here." Elena felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. She had nothing to lose. "Fine," she said. "Let's start with something simple. The life where I married Ryan and we opened that pub in the countryside like he always wanted." Mrs. Hargrove smiled and pulled a book from a nearby shelf. Its cover was plain, titled simply "The Pub Life." Elena took it, opened it, and felt a rush like falling through warm water. She woke up in a cozy stone cottage attached to a bustling pub called the Oak and Lantern. She was married to Ryan, tall, charming, with the same easy smile she remembered. They had 2 young children, a boy and a girl, who called her mummy and ran to her with sticky hands. The pub was successful. Locals loved the Sunday roasts and live music nights. For the first few hours, it felt perfect. Ryan kissed her good morning. The kids laughed. Customers praised the atmosphere. But as the day unfolded, cracks appeared. Ryan drank heavily once the doors closed. He flirted openly with the young bar staff. Arguments simmered about money and his wandering eyes. In the evenings, Elena felt trapped behind the bar, her dreams of playing music long forgotten. The children were sweet, but the constant noise and resentment left her exhausted. By the end of the day, she realized this life was lonelier than her own. She returned to the library, disappointed but not surprised. "Regret is a story we tell ourselves," Mrs. Hargrove said softly. "Try another." Elena chose the life where she had moved to New Zealand with Lila. The book transported her to a sunny beach house in Auckland. She and Lila ran a successful adventure tour company, kayaking, hiking, wildlife spotting. They were best friends again, laughing over wine at sunset. Elena felt free, adventurous, alive. But then the cracks showed. Lila had a serious illness she had hidden. In this life, Elena's presence had delayed treatment somehow, and complications arose. Guilt crashed over her. The business struggled with regulations. Homesickness for her brother and the familiar English countryside gnawed at her. One evening, as Lila grew weaker, Elena felt the weight of unintended consequences. Back to the library, she tried the Olympic swimmer life. In that version, she had trained rigorously, won gold at the Olympics, become a celebrity with sponsorships and interviews. Her father, who had passed away years ago in her original life, was proud and alive in her memories here. But fame brought isolation. The pressure was crushing. She battled anxiety and eating disorders in secret. Relationships failed because no one understood the discipline. She was successful on paper but empty inside. Depression followed her even here, book after book, life after life. In one, she never quit the band with Marcus. The Echoes became moderately famous. They toured Europe, recorded albums. Marcus was happy, their bond strong. But the lifestyle was chaotic, late nights, drugs, ego clashes. Elena's voice strained from constant performing. She missed quiet mornings and meaningful connections. The fame felt hollow when fans only saw the persona. In another life, she became a glaciologist, fulfilling a passing interest from university. She traveled to remote Arctic stations, studying climate change. It was intellectually stimulating, but lonely. Harsh conditions, failed romances, and the constant awareness of global crises left her anxious and isolated. She tried a life where her cat Whiskers never died, only to discover he passed away a few hours later from an underlying condition. Small regrets led to the same pain. Elena grew frustrated. "None of these feel right," she told Mrs. Hargrove. "Every life has something missing, or something worse." Mrs. Hargrove nodded patiently. "That's the point, dear. The grass isn't greener. It's just different grass. The perfect life doesn't exist because perfection is an illusion. What matters is how you live the one you have." But Elena wasn't ready to hear it. She dove deeper. One life stood out for a while. She had become a philosophy professor at a prestigious university. She lectured on existentialism and the meaning of choice. Students admired her. She had a kind partner, a cozy apartment filled with books. Intellectual conversations filled her days. For the first time in many lives, she felt respected and purposeful. Yet even here, doubts crept in. Her brother Marcus barely spoke to her. Their paths had diverged too far. Old friends felt distant. And deep down, A quiet voice whispered that she missed the simple, imperfect connections of her original life. The record store chats with customers who loved obscure bands, the way Whiskers used to curl on her lap, even the small acts of kindness for Mr. Patel. She returned again. Hours blurred in the library, though time outside remained frozen at midnight. Elena tried hundreds of variations, some wildly different, a rock star, a chef in Paris, a mother of 5 in a happy marriage, some subtle, staying at the record store longer, reconciling with her father before he died. None felt like home. In some, she was happier momentarily. In others, tragedy struck harder. She began to see patterns. Every choice branched into new regrets. No life was without pain. In one particularly dark version, she had pushed everyone away so completely that she lived in total isolation, wealthy but utterly alone. She begged to leave it quickly. Exhausted, Elena sat with Mrs. Hargrove. "Why does it hurt so much? Why can't I find the right one?" "Because you're looking for a life without regret," the librarian said. "But regret is part of being human. It shows you care. The question isn't how to erase it, but how to live with it, and maybe even use it to grow." Elena thought about her original life. The small joys she had overlooked. Late-night talks with customers about music that moved them. The way Theo's face lit up when he nailed a difficult piece on the piano before he quit. Marcus's rare messages that still carried love beneath the anger. Lila's occasional postcards from New Zealand full of stories. She remembered Whiskers purring contentedly on rainy afternoons. Perhaps her life wasn't a failure. It was just hers. Messy, ordinary, full of what-ifs, but also full of quiet beauty she had ignored while drowning in self-blame. One final book called to her. Not a grand alternate life, but a slight variation on her own. In it, she had made mostly the same choices, but with small differences. She had reached out to Marcus sooner after their band fallout, visited her father more in his last years, taken better care of her health, and appreciated the people around her instead of pushing them away with her negativity. She slipped into it. This Elena woke in her familiar flat, but the air felt lighter. Whiskers was alive, in this slight shift. He hadn't slipped out that night. She called Marcus and had a real conversation, apologizing and listening. She messaged Lila with genuine enthusiasm. At the record store, which she still worked at in this version, she chatted warmly with a regular customer about starting a small music community event. It wasn't perfect. She still faced challenges. Money was tight, old regrets lingered like shadows, but she faced them with hope. She played the piano for herself that evening, not for perfection, but for joy. She helped Mr. Patel with a small errand and felt useful. For the first time, Elena felt rooted. This life wasn't flawless, but it was enough. More than enough. She wanted to stay. The library began to dissolve around her. Shelves faded like mist. Mrs. Hargrove smiled warmly. "You found it, Elena. Not by escaping your life, but by choosing to live it differently from now on." Elena woke in a hospital bed, her body weak from the overdose. Tubes and monitors beeped softly. A kind nurse smiled at her. "You're lucky. You made it." Her phone, beside the bed, showed missed calls and messages. From Marcus, Lila, even a worried note from her old boss at the store who had heard rumors. The suicide note was there too, but now it felt like a distant echo. Days passed in recovery. Elena reflected deeply. She reached out to Marcus and they met for coffee, talking honestly about the band, their father, and the distance between them. She reconnected with Lila over video calls, planning a possible visit. She adopted a new kitten from a shelter and named her Luna, vowing to care for her better. She started small music workshops in the community. Nothing grand, just sharing the joy of playing with locals and kids like Theo. The record store took her back part-time after she showed initiative. Life was still ordinary, still imperfect. Rain still fell. Bills still arrived. But Elena no longer saw only the regrets. She saw possibilities. She understood now what the Midnight Library had taught her. Every life contains suffering and joy in equal measure. The perfect life is a myth. What makes a life worth living is presence, kindness, curiosity, and the courage to keep going even when it's hard. Years later, Elena would sometimes think back to that frozen midnight. She never told anyone about the library, not fully, but she carried its lesson like a quiet light. On a rainy evening much like the one that had nearly ended her, she sat at her piano with Luna purring nearby. She played a simple melody, imperfect but heartfelt. Outside, the world turned. Inside, for the first time in a long while, Elena Voss felt at peace with the life she had chosen to live fully. And somewhere, in the spaces between what was and what could have been, a library full of endless books waited patiently. For those who still needed to learn that the only life worth choosing is the one you decide to embrace, regrets and all.